The mining industry says the New South Wales Government's attempts to increase royalties could actually cost the state money. The government announced in yesterday's budget it's hoping to raise just under $1 billion to compensate for the impact of the carbon tax on state-run power stations. Andrew Robertson reports.
Government budgets these days are as much about politics as about money. With Labor in power in Canberra, the O'Farrell government's first budget was always going to be heavy on politics, and on that score it didn't disappoint.
We are not going to accept a multi-billion-dollar hit without taking action to protect the budget on the behalf of the people of New South Wales.
Mr Baird was referring to the impact of the Gillard government's carbon tax on government-owned power stations in New South Wales. The answer: make Canberra pay through its commitment to underwrite mining royalties as part of its mineral resources rent tax.
Mining royalties are a state responsibility, and like other states, we maintain our right to set mining royalty arrangements in accordance with the state's interests. To offset the cost of the carbon tax on the New South Wales budget, the government plans to increase state mining royalties
by just under $1 billion over the next 3 years. And while on the surface it sounds simple enough, the reality, according to Ernst & Young Global Mining and Minerals leader Mike Elliott, is very different, because royalties and Canberra's proposed mineral resources rent tax have little in common.
One of them is calculated based on revenue, the other one's based on profits. And so even just understanding how these complexities are going to actually apply or almost be retrofitted onto the New South Wales royalty system really has some of the New South Wales coal miners quite nervous.
Among them BHP Billiton, whose reaction is typical of the industry. It says it's trying to commence discussions with the New South Wales Government to provide clarity and ensure there are no unintended consequences. One of those unintended consequences could stem from the fact that the legislation for Canberra's mineral resources rent tax has not yet gone through Parliament.
Clearly a change in the state royalty regime, whether it be what we saw earlier in Western Australia or New South Wales, or the potential for other states, could put this significant pressure on the federal government to maybe back out of that deal, which would be very negative consequences for the way that mining investment's been going forward within this state.
Coal is a major industry in New South Wales, centred around the Hunter region to the north of Sydney and the Illawarra to the south. Last year, the state produced 189 million tonnes, valued at $14.5 billion. It has more than 40% of Australia's coal reserves. The New South Wales Minerals Council shares Mike Elliott's concerns about the future of mining investment in New South Wales if royalties are increased.
There are 42 projects, mining projects, waiting for approval in the planning process at the moment. And these are projects that, if approved, will not only give them more royalties, which is clearly what the state government needs and wants to fund important projects for the people of New South Wales, but it will also generate employment and investment in the state.
And Sue Earn Tan goes further. She says the actions of the New South Wales government are very poorly timed and will be felt right across the country.
We have uncertainty about the carbon tax, we have uncertainty about the mineral resources rent tax, we have uncertainty about issues around skill shortage and trying to get more people, we've got potential IR reform on the cards, and then you add this into the mix and you start to make it very difficult and really start to create unacceptable sovereign risks for doing business in Australia.
An argument used by the mining industry when the Runt government first mooted the resources super profits tax. Compromise was found then, and if history is a guide, compromise will be found this time.